Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for taking some time to join us at this session today. My name is Sarah Edwards, and I work in the Government Property Agency Workplace Experience team. I am going to be your host for the next 45 minutes or so. So today we are focusing on building collaborative communities, and if you're new to the Smarter Working Life community, welcome. I hope you're going to get a lot of value out of the experience and expertise that our panel this morning is going to share with you guys. If you're a veteran of the Smarter Working Life community, welcome back. How have you been, babes? It's nice to see you again. So, as I said, we're going to have about 45 minutes to talk through our main topic of building collaborative communities. But Smarter Working Life this year is huge. So we've had February, which is a month full of similar webinars to this, and there are lots of webinars still to happen in the last couple of days of February. I'll do some signposting to the ones that are left at the end of the session today. We also have our Smarter Working Live virtual conference on the 1st of March. So that's going to be where we take a lot of the thought leadership and elevate those in different types of discussions. Now, a really interesting part of that conference day on the 1st of March is going to be some audience-led agenda items. So please use the Slido link that you'll see on top of your page and that will be posted shortly to let us know your views on the Smarter Working pillar that you want hacked as part of our hackathon we'll be running on that day. But also today is your last chance to get in your views and your vote on the questions that you want our panels in the afternoon to answer. So limited time in terms of that is closing today for the panel questions. Get your votes in. Let us know what you're thinking in terms of what you want our panel experts to cover on the 1st of March. Get yourself over to www.smarterworkinglive.com to see what's left of the Smarter Working Live month and to sign up for the conference on the 1st of March if you aren't already signed up. So just as a reminder, all of our Smarter Working Live events are free to attend for the public sector. So if you've got friends, colleagues, networks in your organisations that you think would benefit from the Smarter Working Live activity, make sure that you're forwarding the link for smarterworkinglive.com onto them so they can sign up and get involved in the activity as well. So the format for today's session is I'm going to introduce our three brilliant panel speakers in a moment, and we're going to spend the first part of that 45 minutes talking through that overall theme of building collaborative communities. And then at the end of the session, we're going to cover some of your questions and answers. So please use the chat to, while our speakers are talking through their experiences, get your questions in for our panel. Also, feel free to use the chat for just general kind of what you're thinking about some of the topics that our panelists are going to cover, your experiences as well. Like I said, I'll pose your questions to our experts at the end of the panel. If your questions don't come in, guys, you're going to be left with the questions that I've got for the panel, and they are like, who's your favourite member of Boyzone? What's the best crisp flavour for a crisp sandwich? So you've been warned, get your questions in because they'll be so much better than mine. So let's introduce our panellists and then we'll get underway with kind of talking to them about their experiences of building collaborative communities. So first up, we've got Ruth Smethurst, who is the GPA's, that's Government Property Agencies, Customer Experience Lead. There she is giving us a little wave. So she makes sure that GPA customers and clients have a great workplace experience in the government hubs. And then we're going to introduce Laura Chapman, who works in the Government Property Agency as well as a stakeholder and approval manager, the mandatory wave from our Laura there as well. So she was working alongside Ruth in the customer experience team as well. So some great insights on communities from her. And then last, but by no means least, we have Shona Adam, who's Associate Director for Workplace Change at the Scottish Future Trust. And the Scottish Future Trust work across the public sector in Scotland to provide strategic property advice and workplace guidance and support. So like I said, we are over-delivering in terms of our expertise and brilliant panellists this morning. Right, enough gubbins from me. Let's get on with the meat of today's session. So Ruth, I'm going to come to you first. Why do we need to think about communities in the workplace?
Thanks, Sarah. I want to answer your first couple of questions before I dig into that. So, of course, it's Ronan and smoky bacon, which could be...
nice.
There you have it. You heard it here first. But yeah, to the case in point then, the rationale for communities, I want to actually start by going right the way back to 2020, when we completed a Leesman survey of 25,000 civil servants. So got some really, really good data about people's perceptions of where they were working and how the way they were working had changed because of the pandemic and working from home. And we got a lot of really interesting findings out of this survey. One was that working from home was perceived by the majority of people to really support working productively and to help people deliver on individual tasks. But where we saw a real drop in the working from home experience was around social and collaborative activities. So 35% people felt that activities involving informal social interactions were supported 35% less well at home than they are in the office. People felt that learning from others was supported 20% less well from home than it is in the office. And we know that that learning from others element is particularly key to people who are just starting out in their careers or who are new to the civil service. It's incredibly valuable. So I think we learned from that these are some of the levers that we've really got to pull. The office is no longer just the default place where we work. It's really repositioning itself as the place where we work together. So building communities and relationships across our office estate is really, really key to ensuring that people are able to do that working together as effectively as possible. Also, another massive shift that we've seen over the last couple of years is the number of public servants working together in multi-tenanted hubs. And the smaller and better estate strategy is likely to see this trend just continue to increase. So where we're sharing space and services and facilities with other departments, it's really, really key that we're encouraging good relationships with our neighbours. Firstly, this kind of building communities across different departments means that we're able to share resources and really, really vitally share intelligence between departments and between individuals across the public service who haven't necessarily come into contact with one another before. But it also reduces territorialism, which is really, really important for that sort of sharing of spaces as well. So we're kind of in creating these healthy communities, we're trying to shift the dialogue a little bit from, individuals thinking, I don't want to encroach on Department X's space, to thinking, I might go and sit with Becky today, or I wonder what Anil's doing up on the second floor. This is a huge win for interoperability across the estate. So having those really well-developed, friendly relationships with all of the people in your workspace, whether or not you're sort of directly part of their team, is really, really key to letting things flow. So that's a bit about the business case for building communities. But underpinning all of this, there's an emotional case, which I think almost shouldn't require any explanation. So creating communities in our buildings that bring people together, that encourage them to work towards shared goals, improves connection, it improves people's sense of purpose and people's general satisfaction at work. I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't need a business case to have happy people. But if you do want one, I think the upshot of building these communities is a healthier, more motivated workforce, which will ultimately want to stay with your organisations for longer.
That's quite a compelling case, Ruth. Yeah, wow. So Laura, I'd like to bring you in on this point then. So you were fundamental in the community activity and customer experience part of the Birmingham 23 Stevenson Street Government Hub. At that time, you were working with Ruth in the customer experience team as well. So what was the biggest challenge of building that community in that hub? And what are you most proud of?
Yeah, so 23 Stevenson Street it is a GPA government hub in Birmingham, and it officially reached practical completion in October 2021. So it comprises of 26 different government departments and arm's length bodies, and it holds 1,700 FTE within the building. And the building is really built to support the principles of smarter working. So the GPA's aim is to build and harness communities across all occupants. So whether you're physically stood within the building or you're taking a day to work from home, there's opportunity to connect, collaborate, innovate with other likewise building users. And I suppose the biggest challenge was trying to build a community across so many departments without a physical meeting point. So we initiated the community group during the construction phase of the project, and we were faced with various setbacks from our good old friend COVID, which meant we were heavily reliant on technology to really get that group going. And sometimes it does take a bit of encouragement to get people to participate, to come off mute. There's heavy reliance on the chair to ensure that everyone's involved in that conversation. And we were really forced to think outside the box in terms of activities that harness that social connection. So almost like those, I think they're referred to as water cooler moments that you would have when physically stood within the office. So we did a lot of that through like breakout rooms, rolling chairs, virtual coffee chats. And we rolled out what's called the customer portal, which was a first of its kind. And it provides a platform for community group members to chat, interact in between those community group meetings, as well as access key building information, which you would typically find in a building user guide. And then coming into what I'm probably most proud of is just how that community group has grown and blossomed since its inception. So it really does have that collective sense of ownership within the workplace and empowerment between those building users. And the main purpose of that community group is to share, much like Ruth was covering, so sports, social, well-being, learning events, opportunities across the building, not just within your own department or own team. And making sure that experience is accessible to all. So helping that thriving digital community as well as what's actually within the building. And I do actually have a list which I'm going to read out that the community group have been getting on with, which is just fabulous. So they've been getting on with building-wide fundraiser events such as Christmas Jumper Day, Macmillan Coffee Morning. They always theme suggestions and ideas. So this month is Active Wellbeing Month in February. So they've put together a walking group. They've collaborated with CSSC in terms of yoga. So they've got CSSC to fund equipment and an instructor for yoga sessions. And they've even set up a five-a-side team. They've also worked with the council to coordinate their civil service volunteering days and have done litter picks across the Birmingham city centre. So they're not just keeping that within the building hub community, they're expanding into the local area as well. And my favourite story is just a thing about friendship. So I was speaking to Nikki, who's the community manager at Birmingham, and she shared a story that they're actually in the process of arranging a subsidised meal, again through CSSC, for the community group to meet and socialise outside the office. And one member who's just joined the community group has relocated from London up to Birmingham and just has expressed her excitement in having the opportunity to take part in these kind of activities like the meal, which is fostering those connections and friendships with other likewise building users, which they may not have come across if the community group wasn't in place.
Laura, that is fantastic. So it's really built on all that stuff that Ruth was telling us about the vision for a community. And actually, when you invest in that vision, this is the outcome of it, all those things that you've discussed. Love that. So Shona, I'd like to come to you now. And something that the Scottish Futures Trust is championing is the shared workplace model. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that and why it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd just like to sort of Ruth and Laura's comments about the social spaces and that collected sense of ownership. I think that's so important in all of these models. And I think as we move through this next phase of workplace, it's that purpose of the office. What is the purpose? And it's very much different as we move on. So I was going to come at this for a slightly different angle. But I think that collaboration piece is the direction of travel. There's different types of collaboration, obviously. There's internal team collaboration, cross-team collaboration, and then there's bringing different public sector organisations together. And what does that mean, and what does that look like? And I think one of the things that worked really well during the pandemic was that partnership working piece, was people coming together really quickly in order to serve the population who were struggling with various issues, and having places as we move through this next phase to do that is incredibly important. And I can't remember if it was Ruth or Laura said that or it might have even been Sarah, that we will likely need slightly less workspace as we move forward. So how can we all work together to build these collaborative hubs? What do they look like? It's going to save on our property costs. It's going to improve efficiencies, improve effectiveness. So many different benefits of what we can do as we move forward through this next phase. And that community approach to sharing. So delivering on these collective behaviours and what that looks like is so important. I think I think there's other places, so there's certain localities where you have like-minded partners who all have their own building. So having that opportunity to maybe downsize the estate, to all work together and then get the benefits of that as well. I think that's probably about it from that starter question.
Brilliant. And I mean, you say that's probably about it, Shona, but that is a really vast amount of stuff that you've summarised really neatly into a nutshell for us. So I really thank you for explaining it in a way that's really accessible, that covers a whole wealth of stuff that's happening, especially from the Scottish kind of viewpoint as well. It's really interesting to bring you guys together to look at how that is working out regionally. Brilliant. Thank you, Shona. So, Ruth, I want to come back to you with another question from me then. And I can see lots of questions coming in on the chat. So thank you very much. You're answering my call to action so I don't ask the Boyzone and crisp flavour question. But Ruth, one more question for you, and then one more question for Laura and Shona, and then I'll open up to the audience for theirs. So you've talked a lot about that strategic piece of the case for communities. I suppose, is there one single biggest challenge for organisations in establishing those communities? And if there's just one big key one, what is it?
I think there are several, as you'd imagine. I think Laura has really given us an introduction to what, in my opinion, is probably the biggest challenge, that we are experiencing this paradigm shift in our way of working. So there's a kind of twofold challenge. We know that communities are kind of the glue that will start bringing people back into offices, but we need to make sure that we've got mechanisms for people to feel a part of that community when they aren't coming into the office day by day. So things like the customer portal have been absolutely instrumental in delivering that. One of the other ones that we maybe haven't mentioned is the associated costs, I suppose, of setting up a community. I guess this is a challenge, but one that I'd like to refute, actually. Whenever anything innovative or a little bit different, a little bit outside of the box like this is mentioned, there are always questions raised about how is this funded? How does it actually work? And I think it's really, really important to note that this doesn't have to be something that's overly costly or expensive. It can be as simple as bringing together people to have a discussion about the things that are very important to them, or the things that they see as like common ground between the different departments that they work for. And in some areas, we've had really great results just by sort of saying, okay, well, Department X is moving into this building, as is Department Y, and they both have running clubs. Why don't you all run together? You know, it really, really simple, almost completely free things can be really, really effective. So I'd be watchful of anyone trying to sort of parcel off the cost as being a barrier to delivering these successful communities.
I know we can always count on you for a good debate, Ruth. So thank you for giving us the two sides of that. And Shona, I just wonder then, going off of that question about some of that maybe resistance to start and maintain the communities, are you knocking on an open door with kind of the public sector bits that you're dealing with in the Scottish Future Trust, or is there a bit of a case for change that you have to make?
I think it depends at what level you're discussing. I think there's definitely a desire to do this, but sometimes there are barriers around it perhaps being too hard if people have long leases and different things. So I think it's just, so my colleague Ian Wardrop has developed a really good document that is designed to help people understand what barriers they might come up against and how to perhaps move through those. So I think definitely there's a desire to do this. People see the needs, and it's just working through all the different operational issues that might come up around doing that. And then I think there's another piece around the people part, the behaviours, the culture, how you operate within a shared workspace and how that works for people. Where you've got legislative issues, where you perhaps need private space, building that into the model and building in all the types of spaces that people need is, I think that I don't think anything, you can't not overcome things. It's just understanding, setting all out at the beginning and then working through it all is the main issue. So.
And I know I'm reading our audience's mind, Shona. Is that document that your colleague created about the barriers, can we access that?
Yes,
or is that
of course. Yeah, no, I'll send the link to you after the session. If I can, I'll try and put it in the chat. But
fingers crossed. Yeah, no pressure if you can't put it in the chat. Get out to the audience. Lovely. And Laura, so I'd just like to come to you about that 23 Stevenson Street community in that government hub in Birmingham. So how have you kept them motivated? Have you had to do any reward and recognition initiatives with them? So kind of how do you keep their momentum going?
Good question. So I think really what pushes the group forward is the role of the community manager. So I mentioned her before, Nikki. In Birmingham, we have a permanent community manager whose role it is to really bring a sense of ownership to that workplace, to reach out to the local community and to encourage the right behaviours. She really is the glue between the 26 departmts, and she does a fantastic job in bringing the community to life. And one initiative that she's just kick-started is the TARBAB awards, as we refer to them as. And TARBAB, for anyone who doesn't know, because I'm from Leeds and I didn't know before what it meant, it's an affectionate Brummie way of saying thank you. And the initiative was really came out of the community group to recognise customers from all different departments that are going out of their way to support the community, services, just a thank you recognition in terms of cross-site working within the hub. And it's recognised through a simple non-financial way through a digital pride card. So staff can scan a QR code within the office or access it via the customer portal and fill out a short form on why they think said individual should receive a TARBAB digital pride card, and it's sent direct to that customer. And who doesn't love a thank you? And it's really to recognise that contribution within the building. And then for those who have gone above and beyond, they actually receive a tangible voucher, which they can use at the Costa Coffee Hub on the lower ground floor in Birmingham. So it's really in place to foster that community connection, but also encourage the right behaviours around the workplace. So it's currently being trialled with, fingers crossed, I hope that it is rolled out over other hubs. And there have been 33 nominations since it started, and most of them have been from one individual to another individual in a different department. So you can tell it is really working.
I absolutely love the TARBAB nominations, and I've used them myself to recognise colleagues that have made a difference to me when I've been in 23 Stevenson Street. And I think it shows that incentives like that can really make a difference, and want people to continue to be involved and get them involved as well. You're a bit jealous if your mate's got a TARBAB and you haven't got one. Love it. Ruth, I just want to come to you then before we open up to audience questions one last time. We're really getting our value for money out of you, aren't we? And so we've talked about some of the stuff that's happening at the 23 Stevenson Street Birmingham hub in terms of those incentives and community activities. Can you shed any light on what's happening across some of the other government hubs?
Absolutely, yeah. Do you know, as Laura was talking about the Tarbab Award, I was starting to wonder what the kind of East Anglian equivalent is, so that when we eventually roll it out to Peterborough, we'll have a name that really resonates with the community that we've built up there. But I'm really, really proud to see an emerging community within the Peterborough Hub. This is a shared building between just 4 departments, so relatively few compared to 23 Stevenson Street, but it's opened within the last month. And we've followed a very similar framework in setting up the community group there in Peterborough. But these communities are all about empowerment, and they're all about, something that's self-owned and self-directed. And one of the things that their group have established really quickly is a newsletter called The Key Word. And they've followed, some of the sort of pathways, if you like, that we've laid out for them, and saying this might be a good way to kind of initiate some of your communities. These are some of the activities that are working in other hubs like 23 Stevenson Street, but they've actually gone beyond that as well. They've introduced a lot of initiatives that are close to their own hearts. So like a neurodiverse coffee community and reading group has been set up and established there. They've also really kind of taken the bull by the horns in establishing fair usage for their reflection room, which is kind of in old money what you might have described as a prayer room. Because there is quite a large Muslim community there, they've taken a lot of time in the latest newsletter to talk about Muslim prayer and the role of wudu facilities that are provided in our hubs as well. So it's lovely to see this kind of merging happening there between, I guess the seeds of community that we've planted there are, growing in their own direction. Sorry about the fancy metaphor there, but I'm very, very proud to say what they've been delivering.
Yeah, I can see why. And it's really fascinating that each kind of regional hub, the offer is tailored to what's needed to that. So it's saying, just because this works in 23 Stevenson Street, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate automatically to Peterborough. So I think that, dedicated, tailored approach is so, so important with the communities piece. And let's have a shout out for, if you were to have a Tarbab award in your region, what would it be called, Ruth?
Up here, probably like an A up, I think.
A up, I love it.
Wouldn't it? An A up award.
Love it. Laura, a bit cheeky because I know you're kind of same area as Ruth, but
I probably have a cheers, love.
Cheers, love. It. Shona, give us the Scottish version of it.
I have absolutely no idea. I can't think of anything. I'm so sorry.
I think I can see Charlotte on the chat has come through. We're saying if it was a Bristol hub, it'd be Gert Lush Award. And as I am Bristol based, it absolutely would be Gert Lush. So I love that. Absolutely love it. Right, let's open up to some questions from the audience. So we're going to probably have about 10 minutes of questions, and then I'll do a nice sum up of everything and kind of signpost you some of the future events at the end. So just having a look through some of your main points. One thing that stood out to me in particular is we've covered the role of Nikki Snaith in that Birmingham 23 Stevenson Street hub. But Ruth, I wonder if you can tell us a bit more kind of about that role. Is it funded? All that kind of context that comes with the role of Nikki.
Absolutely. So Nikki's role at the moment, it's quite a unique one. It is a funded role. And again, we're being a little bit pioneering with some of the language that we use. I know I mentioned reflection rooms before, but Nikki is, her job title is community manager. In other buildings, we have building managers who take on that kind of coordinating role of making sure that there aren't, intense clashes between big cross-departmental events that are taking place, and that any VIPs to the building are made welcome and received accordingly. So Nikki's role takes on a lot of those sort of traditional functions that you get in sort of soft FM. But given the fact that, 23 Stevenson Street is GPA's headquarters, it is our first and flagship hub. and we have such a melting pot of different departments. So Laura's mentioned the number a couple of times. It's 26. I have been listening to you, Laura. There is, you know, a really meaty piece of work for Nikki in keeping that sense of community, keeping the momentum and keeping the drive behind it. So currently she is one of a kind, but our recent success in the Leesman survey that was completed there indicated that that's one of the areas in which 23 Stevenson Street as a hub is really setting itself apart from a lot of the rest of the government estate, and, you know, really setting itself up on that world stage as a great place to work. So in a roundabout way, I suppose I'm saying we would like to see a lot more Nikki's coming into the organisation, supporting our communities.
Absolutely. And anybody that's come across Nikki Snaith in that Birmingham 23 Stevenson Street place says exactly the same thing. You know, we need to refine human cloning so we can have Nikki's all over the place.
Everyone needs a Nikki in their life.
Absolutely. So Laura, we've had some questions about the customer portal. You touched on it briefly. Just wondered if you could expand on exactly what it is.
Sure. So it's essentially an intranet site, so a website which can be accessed via the browser. I think when bringing lots of different departments together, being a civil servant, we know how IT works. We're all on different IT systems. So this is accessible by everyone. The portal holds all the building information. So anything you would typically find in a building user guide, which was in old-fashioned terms, Word document, it's now live on this website. So it's updated in live real terms. It almost forces staff to be a bit more self-serving, so they can go and search in terms and find the information they need without having to contact anyone or dig out that document. But it also has a different function. So it also enables the community to chat between each other. And it allows Nikki, the community manager, to push out messages. So Ruth, please do chip in because you know a lot about the portal, but it's been rolled out over lots of different GPA hubs. Stevenson Street was the first. So that's how we're hoping to move forward with that tool to really make those digital communities thrive as well as physical within the building. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Ruth.
I think you've summed it up really well there. I think again, we've always struggled to find interoperable platforms that all public servants can use and can access. So in its initial guise, in its first format, the customer portal was intended to get information to customers that they need to know whilst working in the building. But I do see them as a really key enabler for delivering digital communities, keeping people more closely connected, and potentially, you know, encouraging them to, you know, make the journey into the building when it's appropriate. You know, if they have use of that platform and have sight of what's going to be happening in the building, who will be in the building at a given time, it's just a bit of an anchor point to help bring people back together.
The portal as well was one of its kind. So it was trialed at Stevenson Street, and it's been lovely to see it develop alongside us using it in real life. So I'm sure there's lots of developments on the way for it, but yeah, it's got a good solid base. Absolutely.
And unfortunately, Carol, we can't share a link to the customer portal because you have to be a building user in the building that the portal is for. So if you're based at 23 Stevenson Street, you'll get a link to the portal because you're a staff member there. but kind of if you want to contact us afterwards, happy to give you some screenshots of what the portal actually looks like, because we're, you know, it's not a secret thing. We want to show you, at least give you a feel for what it looks like. And I think Laura and Ruth, your points about that digital community really go to Andy Lake's question on the chat as well, about how to help people feel part of something that isn't exclusive to a building. So I think those digital tools to help people connect when they're not in that space, and maybe, you know, they're only going to be in that space once every so often, helps them still feel a part of it. So I'm sure, you know, amongst us in the audience, we've got lots of examples of that digital community building, as well as kind of the emphasis on the building community as well. It's a really important part to consider. Shona, a question for you. So we've had a couple of questions in the chat about kind of how do we get these communities off the ground? Is there a framework? So I'm just wondering if you've got some top tips for us listening and wanting to kind of act on some of the stuff we've heard today. What are your top tips for setting up communities?
I think the main one is just to gather as much information at the start about how people work, the tasks they do, the way the organisation is structured, and then almost try and understand what is perception and what is legislative. So I think that's quite important, just to pick through all that and say, well, you're saying you need a private room for that. Is that a legislative issue? Is that a preference? How does that work? And I think, I mean, we use the word triage, so it's almost like your Nicky person in our language would be the triage person who sorts everything. So they meet you at the door, they work out where you're going to go and what you're going to do and how all that works, and they support you in that network. So that would be the main things, I think. And then I think just that there's lots of practical things around leases and ownership and how the model's set up, all of those practicalities. And just to add, I had a response to Andy's question. We have our first digital organisation in Scotland without a workplace.
Wow.
So Redress Scotland were set up during lockdown, and they went through the process, decided, right, we need to look for an office, went through all of that, and then thought, actually, we're working okay digitally. So they have progressed with that. They build their culture through virtual tools, and they work on that model. So they've got lots of good resources that they use on building a culture across a digital organisation. So
wowzers. And before kind of we went live on the stage, we were talking about, Shona, whether you've got any idea, kind of experiences of communities that have kind of stood up and worked well recently. And you said that around you, you're surrounded by which is such a visual of you just being like pulling things from around it.
On paper. No, we've got lots of good things underway. And so before the pandemic, a good few years before the pandemic, Eastwood Health Centre was one of the great examples, and that was council, NHS and GP practices setting up in the same building. So council and NHS could sit at the same desk and access their systems. Now, I think now we're on to a different system where we use Wi-Fi, but at that point it was two buttons, one was red and one was blue, and whether you were NHS, you just clicked which button you were going to pick. And that has worked really well. That I did a video with them, and it's the one that I've gone in, and when you asked people how they felt, they all smiled and said it was brilliant and they loved it. And that was such a nice thing to do. So all the videos are up on our Vimeo access around how that works. And I think that it brought so many extra benefits for that community, because I had a little cafe. You could see every NHS type service that you needed. So podiatry was there, your GP, all different services. You could go and sit in the cafe before you went in, and that cafe sort of meshed that community, I would say, because there was nothing like that in the area, and it was just a lovely experience just going to visit that one. A more recent one is the Strive project in Chapman, which is police and council coming together to deliver better outcomes for the community. And that one, there's a video going live for that probably in the next few days around what the experience is, how they've delivered that and how that works. So that one is a really, really nice little project. There's another one in Perth, which is quite small, but quite impactful. So Skills Development Scotland and the council joining together in space, and again delivering better outcomes for the people that come, because they can come for all sorts of different things in that space. So lots of different really good examples out there of how people are doing things.
Yeah, absolutely, Shona. And I feel like we could talk to you for the rest of the day and not even scratch the surface of those case studies that you're surrounded by. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So one final thought from you guys on the question each, and then I'll look to close us up for the session today. So there's a couple of comments on the chat about, some of the challenges with these communities and reducing that territorialism. I think you alluded to it at the start, Ruth. So can we leave with one tip or something that works really well in reducing that tutorialism when you're sharing space? Laura, can I start with you first?
Yeah, sure. I would say, again, it's through that reinforcement of behaviours. So through that reward and recognition schemes, through word of mouth of peers, it is really reinforcing that this is a shared space, and pulling colleagues up if they're not following that.
Yeah, absolutely. Shona, anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, definitely around that behaviours piece. And I think people always drift back, or they tend to drift back to their old ways. And it's always just reminding and keeping getting people to work differently and just reminding them of that. Even in our office, I end up sometimes reminding people that you don't have to sit at a desk all day. You can actually move about and use different spaces. So.
Brilliant. Thank you, Shona. And Ruth, I've left you to last, which is the hardest part, right? Because how are you going to build on what Laura and Shona?
Yeah. Can't you? But I'd like to close with a reflection on power to the people here. And that's been my observation in working with communities. Territorialism it's a very real issue, and it's a very real challenge that we're facing. But more often than not, in my lived experience, that comes from a departmental angle. If you encourage and foster relationships between individual people that transcend, I work for such and such and I work for so and so, that territorialism tends to evaporate under that.
Absolutely. People and time. And that's a really nice reflection point to leave us on for today then. So I'm going to start closing. A massive round of applause for Ruth, Laura and Shona. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today. It's been absolutely fascinating. I feel really motivated and inspired to really look into communities. And I guess that's our call to action for you out there watching us. You guys have spent the last 45 minutes with us. So think about the communities that are in your workspaces that you can get involved in, or advocate for your colleagues to get involved in as well. Don't keep all that good stuff to yourself. Start spreading the word and getting involved. If you need to contact us and if we haven't had time to cover your question, I'm really sorry. We are going to post our multi-user in email in the chat for you. If you want to carry on the discussion or you want to get your question answered, please use that to get in touch with us. So just a final wrap up on what's left of Smarter Working Month. So today we've got, and this week there's lots of sessions happening. We have 2 more sessions today. So midday, there's a communication and collaboration from Ring Central. And then at 2 p.m, we have work in 2023 and beyond, and that's with Zoom. So remember to check out the smarterworkinglive.com website, get yourself booked onto other activity that's happening, and get on to that conference day as well. We have got a feedback link if you want to tell us about your experiences from the session today. We would love to know how you found it, good, bad or ugly. We want to know. So final thank you, Ruth, Shona and Laura. A thank you to you guys out there for being with us today and setting the chat alight with your questions and experiences as well. That makes a real difference to us, and knowing that you're feeling engaged in this subject. So have a great rest of the day, everyone. Catch you soon. Bye.